Good afternoon. My name is David Bose. I am the Communications and Marketing Director for Washington Policy Center, and welcome to this edition of Washington Policy on the Go. Now, we're coming into a special time of year where people are very much focused on the Christmas holiday and New Year, and people start to kind of lose track of policy, particularly toward the end of the month. So we have a Zoom session scheduled for the 20th, but we might do a truncated version. Or we might, it just depends on what's happening at that time because it's so close. It's part of the Christmas week. So watch your emails for that, for those of you who are on the invite list, because we'll do an update on that, that particular episode and coming up a bit later in the month when we decide what we're going to do, because we will have some new solutions on the table, video assets out, some pretty good policy stuff for you to share with friends. The question is, of course, given that it's Christmas week, is this the time to share the politics? But maybe it's perfect because it's right before your dinner and stuff. But what we might do is wait on that and share the rest of that after the new year. But we'll watch that. I also wanted to encourage you. I tried to get Mark Harmsworth on today's episode as well, but there's a lot of busy schedules this week. Mark has a pretty funny new blog that I'd encourage you to check out and share. The headline alone amused me. It was "Government Agency Creates Program to Fight Costly Small Business Regulation Created by Government Agency Programs." And the reason that it's fun is Mark's just laying out this case where we have a prominent government official stepping forward saying, hey, we've got to help small businesses. They are trapped in this red tape. And we've got to help them navigate through this red tape because a lot of it doesn't make sense. And it's hindering small businesses and making it harder for people to start up and flourish and get going. But what they don't seem to recognize is they're the very ones that have created the red tape. So they're creating the red tape. Now they want credit for moving people through that red tape instead of just taking a step back and saying, maybe we should get rid of some of this red tape. Maybe we should make it easier for people to go through these businesses. And then as a follow-up to that, we got a message from an individual who said there's actually more than one government program that is dedicated to guiding people through the red tape, and often they're in conflict and competition with each other. So the whole thing becomes rather farcical when you take a look at it. And it's an example of how sometimes people create work, for themselves. And then instead of taking a step back and doing things differently, they just keep plowing forward, adding to their own burdens and the burdens of others. So it's a kind of a refreshing way. It's comical, but it's also a refreshing and important way to take a look at government. Now, today we're joined by Liv Finne, our Center for Education Director. She is here to talk to us about what's happening with CRT, critical race theory. In Washington State, we did have a district saying no to CRT, and I want to have Liv on to talk to us about that. Liv, you did a blog specifically about the CRT and I think it was Richland, and what happened there. Tell us about how the school board became aware of the problem and what they did.
Well, this is very good news. What just happened in Richland just a couple of weeks ago. The Richland School Board passed a resolution, I think it was Resolution 2360, which prohibited the teaching of critical race theory racism in their schools. And as most people know, that critical race theory racism was sponsored by this. It's state-sponsored racism that was introduced into the public schools and ratified by the state legislature back in 2021. The governor signed Senate Bill 5044. And on May 5th, 2021, requiring every public school employee to be trained in this ideology. It is a dangerous and harmful and divisive ideology. And soon after that bill was passed, a couple of districts over here on the western side of the Cascades, the Peninsula School District and the Chehalis School District, passed resolutions prohibiting teachers from teaching children that their race will define their futures, and that they are critical race theory teaches that if you're white, you belong to an oppressor class. If you're Black or brown, you're oppressed by the whites, and that you can't hope to get ahead in this society, which of course is false and untrue, and really a hateful ideology being taught to our children right now. So it was gratifying to see 2 districts last year come forward and prohibit that teaching in their districts. But now this year, recently, the Kennewick, a few months ago and during the summer, the Kennewick School District passed a similar resolution as the Peninsula School Districts. And then seeing that, the Richland School Board move forward to protect their own children in their own district from this CRT racism. And we've been writing about this for, since early, late 2020, when we saw it moving into the schools and objecting to its being passed in the legislature, and writing about, promising moves by local school boards to rid their districts of this hateful thinking. So, of course, I'm following this very closely. I have to tell you, Dave, if you want to look, if you're feeling down on these rainy days, dark days, and you're worried about the future of our democracy, look up the tapes of these districts, the Kennewick School District debate and the Richland School District debate on these resolutions, because it gives you chills about because what happens is people from the community come and speak and say, this is not good for our children, we should not have this. And then the pro CRT people come in and say, you must do this because that's the only way to protect people from discrimination. Okay, so there's these community discussions about race and radical gender politics going on within the bounds of school district meetings, and it really gives you a great sense of respect for the process of self-government, because just to bring up the topic takes courage. Takes courage of elected school board directors to bring up and then actually pass these resolutions. It's a great victory for the First Amendment, for civil rights, and I'm expecting that more will happen because of this sort of thing will happen, because I'm hearing of other parent groups organizing to elect candidates who are against CRT to their local school boards. And I think this kind of movement is growing across the nation. So that's, of course, why I'm following this so closely, because it really represents a danger, a direct threat to teaching children math, reading, science, and history, which of course is what the purpose of the schools is. So that's why I follow this.
I thought it was also interesting. One of the things that Richland did was, they made this list of things that the children shall not be taught. For example, children shall not be taught that they are guilty, by virtue of their race, of the sins or atrocities committed in the past by people who shared that race. So there's not a group guilt, and that children will not be taught that that one race is oppressive while another race, is not. And so what's interesting to me about that is so often in the CRT debate, there's the accusations that fly that say, well, what you're trying to do is ban the historical teaching about wrongs that were committed, discrimination, say whether it's slavery or whether it's discrimination against Chinese Americans in the railroad era and other times, that we're trying to ban this kind of factual teaching. But they didn't ban any of that. What they said very specifically was the things that you're not allowed to tell kids about themselves right now, and that's a different focus.
That is such a good point, because a false narrative, a false caricature, and dismissal of conservatives who are objecting to critical race theory is occurring right now in the media. And this false narrative that somehow people object to critical race theory because they objected to the teachings of the actual racist occurrences in our past and perhaps in our present. That is just a falsehood the media has bought onto. So the media is defending people who are pushing a racist narrative upon our vulnerable children in our schools. And I just find it appalling. So, I have attempted to refute that false narrative and some people are listening, some people are not. The point is that it's actually happening. If you actually talk to children in the schools, they'll tell you that white teachers are telling white children that they're racist just by virtue of having white skin. And that's just an affront and an attack. And it's also harmful to children of color because they're being told that they are not going to succeed in our society. And so why should they even study and work hard in school so they can succeed in society, assuming that you can generalize that one group of children is not doing well on the basis of race, which is a falsehood. So, this resolution, if, for journalists with integrity, if they were to read the resolution, they would see that it actually specifically states that children will be taught the factual basis of our history. Okay, it says right in the resolution. So that's a direct refutation of this false narrative, that somehow conservatives don't want the facts taught about terrible racist occurrences that happened in our past. That is just not true. But we also want to be taught the full history of our country. We want children to be taught about the 600,000 people, for example, who died in the Civil War to abolish the hateful institution of slavery, and so on and so forth. So this cherry-picked, I just can't understand why people are so willing to fall for cherry-picked narratives that are dismissing whole sectors of society baselessly.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall, for as far back as I can remember in policy, which is going back a few decades now, there's there have been goals in schools and standards of curriculum so that kids are sure to learn about slavery. They're going to learn about discrimination and other rights violations that have occurred, Japanese internment camps and other things.
Of course.
And yet part of the rhetoric right now is that, somehow kids have been denied this the whole time, and that's simply not the case. And there's
exactly,
you can go back and see that, literally.
Well, they're trying to exactly right. We have been taught these terrible incidences of race in our country. What do you think led to the 1964 Civil Rights Act? We passed laws to make it illegal to make decisions based on race in this country back in the 1960s. And somehow the defenders of CRT racism claim that never happened, right? And so they claim that our society is systemically racist, even though they cannot point to a single law that allows for this, allows for racism, except perhaps these CRT laws that they've passed, which are themselves a violation of our civil rights and our constitutional rights. So it's a gross distortion of fact for a political narrative. Clearly, it's intended to seize power and create more power and influence for these radicals on the far left. And
there was a question posed as to, could we post a link to the resolutions that the districts are passing? And I just wanted to point out that you've actually done that already. Go to WashingtonPolicy.org. And on the blog post that Liv posted about Richland, right at the bottom, there is a link to the Richland resolution. So if you're interested in seeing that resolution, you can see it right there. And you can, copy, paste, share that link, whatever you need there. Also, for those asking, are the Zoom meetings archived for future viewing? We generally post our Washington Policy on the Go within 48 hours of its completion. It's on our YouTube page, usually the next day, but sometimes it takes 24 hours for other reasons. But you can always check out our YouTube channel. The Washington Policy on the Go is there, and you can share that with friends also. So I know, this is maybe outside the scope of what we were talking about, Liv, but was there anything in the past election that you saw related to CRT that you found of note, whether it was moving toward the direction of more CRT or toward more of a backlash against it? Was there anything that stood out to you from the results in November?
Well, I wish I had the actual numbers, but I did notice that there were a lot of school board races that were flipped to conservative candidates. And the reason for that is CRT, okay, and the radical gender curriculum that is being forced down people's throats. That was a result of this election. And that I see as an encouraging sign going forward. The other thing that I saw out of the previous, recently, was that the governor of Florida has now weighed in on school board elections, saying and saying that, and pass laws against CRT racism. So I am now seeing that kind of thinking spread to other states, which is also very encouraging.
How do you see CRT relating to ESAs, education savings accounts, where parents could, I take it if parents thought, hey, you know what, we're not getting enough, we're not getting enough information about the atrocities of the past, an ESA would allow that parent to move their child to any school that maybe did put a greater focus on that, right?
Well, exactly right. I mean, education savings accounts, as most people know I hope most people know by now, are accounts that the government provides to families who want it. Anyone who, if people are happy with their local public schools, it's not for them, but for families who are unhappy, can get in most of these accounts 90% of the sums that the state provides to educate their children. And so in Washington State, that's about the equivalent of about $12,000. And the parents actually get this account from the government with this money in it, and they are allowed to then customize the education program for their child. And you're getting right at something really interesting, that the question of sending your child to a school whose values you support. And now the public schools are adopting values that are, that are the very antipathy of American values of equal justice for all, equal treatment for all, a colorblind society. We're now creating schools that are in direct opposition to that value. So education savings accounts now will allow families who believe in the sort of founding principles of our government, and self-government, free speech, for example, to send their kids to schools, to create schools that teach the truth of the history, the full truth, warts and all, because our history, which is now being suppressed in the traditional public schools, our history taught that this nation was founded on, it was an incredible country to, at that time, found a nation based on the principles of liberty and free expression and equal justice for all. That was a radical departure towards the good at the time. And now our children are being taught that and so we were taught as children that this was a great country. Yes, of course, it fell short of these ideals in cases, but everyone shared the ideal of moving forward towards a better and more just society. And now the children are being taught, no, this is a terrible country you have been born into, that it's institutionally racist, that it was founded to promote the institution of slavery. That's that whole 1619 Project falsehood that was promoted by the New York Times. So creating education savings accounts allows families to say, no, I do not buy into these values that are now being pushed by the traditional public schools. I am going to take my money, it's my money for my child, intended by taxpayers to educate my child. And so I am going to create a micro school with other like-minded families, or I'm going to send my child to a private school with values similar to mine. So this is part of this. Is a very interesting point you raise about sending your children to schools with values you feel, and who makes the decision over educating and bringing up that child. Is it going to be the state with these, indoctrination, propaganda going on, or is it going to be the family who bore the child, raised the child, has the God-given right to direct the education of the child? So these are big stakes, I have to say. The advent of critical race theory has actually shocked me that this could happen so fast, and that our public school teachers could embrace it so mindlessly. I mean, they're supposed to have college educations, but they don't seem to know that we passed the Civil Rights Act in 1960. Some of them, not all of them, obviously. I'm not trying not to generalize like they do, but I'm really kind of shocked that we could have such a poorly educated cohort of teachers that would even buy this, because this is racism per se on its face.
Well, it seems to take the message of Dr. King, which would be to not judge people by the color of their skin, but the content of their character, and to create this colorblind society that even to advocate that would somehow be a message of white supremacy under this CRT, because
Yes.
you're in denial of the permanence
Yes.
of this structure, and it
Yes.
it's they don't say, hey, dump this dream speech, but that seems to be what is described in the ideology.
Oh, in fact, that's what they're saying. If you bring up the Martin Luther King speech, you're called a white supremacist, and say it's really appalling. Okay, the Dave, last week the State Department of Health released what they called learning materials to be given to teachers to teach that the climate change is causing health problems. Okay, so I looked into this to see what's in these learning materials. I have these 5 modules of I have a huge pad of paper here that I printed out to look at what's in these materials, and they are making, and in one of the pages, it said that science is racist. It has a long history of racism, and if you say that if you resist that characterization by saying it's not in science now, you are considered racist, sexist, if you're in science. So they've attacked science directly on, and it's using exactly that circular reasoning. If you say no, that's not the case, because of Martin Luther King saying, don't judge me on the color of my skin, but on the content of my character, and you are a racist. That's exactly how they're applying their thinking. It's a circular sort of thing. If you resist, it means you're racist, so you cannot win under the way they think. Which tells you it's not reason-based, right?
It's typical about too much political debate these days, where the effort is not to engage in conversation, but to preempt it. Because if you can define your opponent as some sort of evil person right off from the get-go, they shouldn't be listened to because they're just advocates of evil, then you don't have to have the conversation with them about what they're actually advocating, because you've already shut them off. And that seems to be the goal on a lot of this. I know we talked about this before, but it seems to relate in a way. You pointed out that with the national assessment test scores coming out for kids nationwide, that Catholic schools would be the number one. If they were a state by themselves, they would be the number one highest achieving schools. And that seems to fly in the face of, I would assume that the Catholic Church as an institution would be part of the problem based on a CRT ideology, and yet here's a situation where a lot of minority kids are attending these Catholic schools, a lot of disadvantaged socioeconomically speaking kids are in these schools, and yet they're flourishing there more so than in other environments. And so there seems to be some lessons from the Catholic-led schools that should be of value to the general public school system.
Well, yes, but it gets back to putting yourself in the shoes of a parent faced with, let's say, COVID schools shut down, and your child is not getting an education at all for over 2 years. You put yourself in the shoes of those parents, and everyone acknowledges that they need alternatives, and the Catholic schools are one alternative, but there are lots of other alternatives, and that's this. The Catholic schools have done particularly well because they kept their schools open during COVID, because they were more focused on the delivering education to the children in their schools than the traditional public schools were during that time. So that just tells you something about the entire sector of the Catholic schools. But it wasn't just Catholic schools. It was private schools across the board that were not Catholic. It was public charter schools that also opened more rapidly than the traditional public schools. It tells you that the system of schools that relies upon tuition payments, that is responsible or relies on choices of parents, is going to be, by definition, more responsive to the needs and wishes of parents. And that is the whole point of the school choice movement, is to allow those who are directly affected by the service being provided, to withdraw from that service if they're not getting if their values are not being, if the school does not share in their family's values, if the child is not being educated up to basic standards, if the child is safer at a choice school than at an assigned inner city school, for whatever reason the parent would want, that is the focus that we need to really keep on, because that is what leads to, the research is showing this all over the place. If you have enough school choice programs giving parents options, then the traditional public school system will improve itself from within. So it's not just good for the families that are given the option to leave, but it's good for the families who decide to stay, because then that competition will make the traditional system look at itself and say, oh, well, we've really got to be more efficient with the dollars we get, or we need to end some of these union-based seniority hiring and firing rules where the youngest teachers get fired first, all the rest of it. There's just a whole panoply of bad policies in the public schools that limit the opportunities of children to grow and learn. And so that's why school choice is really the best. And I've just been doing research on this, David. I mean, I go on forever. Really, I don't. If I'm boring you, let me know. But I have to say, I'm finding that I found out that there are many European countries that allow for school choice. Places like Belgium and the Netherlands and England and France and Norway and Sweden, they allow families, if they're not happy with the traditional public school, to take the public funding and send their kids to private schools. And large percentages of their population, I think the Netherlands has over 50% of the people are going to private schools with public funding. And they're, their whole school system hasn't declined. Their democracies haven't declined, that schools still get plenty of money, the traditional public schools. Somehow, some way, that society has given those parents an option for educating their children, and they have all survived and done better. So for this incredible fear to be, all these, the parade of horribles, if we allow parents, I mean, I'm in the middle of a paper. Okay, I'll just tell everybody, I'm writing a paper called six reasons that school choice, 6 reasons given why school choice.
Well, let me just interject there for a moment while you look for that. Whenever I think of the kids that are failing in a district, and I've said this before, but I always think, how long should a child be compelled, because of lack of resources, to go to a school that is dangerous to them, or they fear getting beat up? How long should they have to keep going there?
Yes.
Or how long should they have to go to a school that we know as outsiders, because they do testing on such things, that we know that their opportunities will be limited, that their outcome is surely less than what their potential is? How long should they be stuck in the school that reduces their potential? And then people say, well, we got to give these schools these chances to grow and succeed. And as you point out, competition does that when kids leave. But the kids, they don't have that time, because if you give them 2 years for them to grow, they moved from, through their junior year and senior year, and they're lost and they suffered the consequences. Whereas if the kid gets to leave and go to a school that fits their potential, the school can make those changes and improve. And the child is not the loser. The child doesn't pay the price,
You put your finger right on it. There's urgency regarding the education of children. The individual child, educating that individual child should be the penultimate, the paramount goal to achieve here, and not about money, not about all the rest of the arguments people use to deny this option to families. Why not give families who are, the option? Why is something is buzzing and going off on my darn phone here? But now I found the title of the article. It's called 6 Objections to School Choice and Why They Are Wrong. And it collects something that's not.
You got to face the microphone for it to pick up.
I got it. I got it ended the little buzzing. But So no, your point about that's just, when I had children in the public schools, I looked up the word for this. It's called temporizing. temporizing means using time to avoid making changes. You know, this public school says that all the time. If you just gave us more money, we would get little Johnny educated. Well, by the time they get more money, the kid is 6 years older and he's already lost his opportunity to get an education. They wait out parents because they know parents are captive and they don't make changes. And the loud mouths who are complaining, they just sort of figure out ways to isolate them and make them feel like they are, you know, crazy. It's the same argument, the same point that you were making about the political debate today. If parents who are not happy are ostracized and shunted to the side and made to look like something's wrong with them, instead of giving them actual power. And so it's this giving parents power has to come down to the money, because that's what controls decision making in the public schools and everywhere else. Giving parents actual control over actual dollars. Just imagine what that would be. You had $12,000 to educate your child. You could get together with a group of your friends to create a school that really teaches the truth about American history all the way through. You could get together with your friends to make a science-based inquiry type of school, if you like. You could create a Montessori school. You could actually teach the science of reading in your school, so every single child would learn to be proficient in reading by the time they're in 3rd or 4th grade, which is not happening in the public schools today. Just think about that. I mean, if you just focus on how much better the children would be off if their parents had control, everyone would get behind this. So it's obvious that there's political forces that are resisting change, and for the sake of their own, comfortable financial setup within the government system. I mean, if we were truly trying to help families, we would do like the Netherlands does. I'll get you this here of this paper. Here it is. I'll give it to you right now, sort of a prelude. Australia, 25% of the children attend private schools using public funds. Belgium, 58%. Denmark, 11%. France, 16%. South Korea, 20%, 21%. Netherlands, 76%. Spain, 24%. And the United Kingdom, 30%. This is Europe. Here we are in Washington State. We're not going to let one child benefit from public funding to go to private school. So what does that tell you about Washington State?
Yeah, and as you point out, it's easy that there's this debate. They'll say, well, it's public dollars. And for colleges and higher ed, for a long time, we've had people utilize public dollars to go to private schools. It's happened for many decades to the and that's to the plus, on the plus side for choice for people. On schools, you have to ask yourself, is the goal to educate the child, or is it to perpetuate a system? You have a new video, fundstudentsfirst.org. It's our Solutions on the Table series. We've been promoting that video. I hope a lot of people are seeing it. You can share it, by going to Solutions on the Table or fundstudentsfirst.com and go there, check out the new video that Liv has about ESAs, and you can share that. It's easy to do. It's also on our YouTube page if you want to grab it there.
Great job with that, Dave. You did a great job with that video. We also, it isn't just colleges. We allow dollars to go to the choice of the parents and the student. It's preschool. Did you realize that? That if you are on government assistance, you get aid to send your child to preschool, and you can choose a private religious preschool. So before kindergarten, and after 12th grade, we allow school choice, the free movement of public dollars to the choices of parents, but not if you're in K through 12, when the children are getting the foundation they need to succeed in college, the most critical years. I mean, you could turn this entire performance of the system around if you just gave it to the kindergarten through 4th grade students when children are learning how to read, which is so critical. It would be very positive development.
Well, I can tell from comments, people are excited about the opportunity for school choice. As we know, polling has never been higher in terms of support for more options for parents, more choice for parents. The question is, will political leadership follow that trend, the trend of the desire of the people? With public opinion, anything's possible. Without it, nothing is. But just because you have a big public, support for something doesn't mean that it'll take root, because on the other side of things, there's vested interests that say, hey, the system is ours, we're keeping it the way it is, and we don't want that competition. So,
Yes.
it's going to be a battle going forward for parents who want expanded options.
Yes, but if you look at the state of Arizona, for example, which has many rural districts, one of the issues by people like me, school choice proponents, that have been raised by objectors of school choice who may be Republican in rural districts. They say, oh, well, we don't need school choice. We have fine public schools. So why should we get on this bandwagon and take on the union, who is going to block it in every step of the way? And that shows a refusal to listen to constituents, because as you just mentioned, the polls show the people even in rural districts want school choice, because 72% of the country right now supports school choice. That means strong majorities of Democrats, Independents, and Republicans all support the idea of giving parents control over a portion of the dollars so they can educate their children the way they best see fit. So that means that it's true that in rural districts, this is also true. And even though if there are no, and then you'll hear this argument, well, there are no private schools in these rural districts. Well, people create out of COVID have learned to create micro schools on their own. This is not an obstacle. The lack of private schools in a rural district is not an obstacle to school choice, because new private schools will sprout out if parents have control over that money. And take a look at Arizona, which is mostly rural. They passed the most exciting school choice bill in the nation, offering to, it's called universal school choice. Every family in Arizona is now eligible to receive, what is the dollar amount? $7,000 in state funding in an account that they can control to educate their child. And now, the last I read, this was just passed last summer, and in the fall, 24,000 families signed up for this. That state is the most interesting state, because they don't seem to have the same kind of attitude of, well, we're going to tell parents we the government are going to decide for parents. We, the union, love our children, and we're the best and only people who can decide how a child needs to be educated. They don't have that attitude in Arizona. They respect parents. They respect parents are closest to the children, that the parents are the child's first teachers, that the parents have lasting influence, that the lessons from parents are, that having a child is God-given, and the lessons that parents give their children last their entire lives. Teachers come and go, their lessons are transient. To put teachers at the top and let them decide when they're backed by these powerful self-interested unions is a perversion of the whole ideal here. The parents should be given the power, because they are the closest. They know what to do. And it's a beautiful thing, because it's the ultimate decentralization of public education. Decisions made at the kitchen table instead of being made at some district superintendent's office, where they don't know any of the children in the schools, or state houses have never met a child in a local district.
And it's funny how
this is an idea that is not going to be stopped, because I have to tell you, Dave, the groups of parents that are organizing to get this delivered are all over the nation, and they are not going to quit. So it's quite an exciting time to be a policy analyst, because it's something, all of a sudden there's this huge bulwark of parents moving and activating to get this. It's exciting. I'm excited by it.
Yeah, and it's also interesting that in all conversation outside of this one, which is how to systemically change education, the conversation about children is always about how they're unique, how they're not one size fits all, how each has their own inspirational goals, and they respond differently to different learning tools and different learning methods. So everything just screams out, hey, there's a really individualized approach where you can maximize the potential here. But for some reason, when it comes to government, there's this kind of retreat that says, no, we've got to have a state-based, one size fits all system, and we got to fit them in here, and they can, we'll find a way to fit them in this system here, instead of just saying, you're right. There's just all kinds of, there's so many variables, we'll never track them all. So if we open it up, we get more opportunities for more kids. and their potential will be reached more. We'll reach them in the public schools, and we'll reach them in private schools. We'll reach them in a mix, because they're going to pick and choose a la carte, whatever is best for them. But there's a heavy resistance there that you can see that still needs broken through. Arizona's not a part of that, and it'll be exciting to watch how that changes. And I know we've got our holidays coming up. Liv, I hope you're able to take a little bit of time off as well. I think a lot of people will be taking a mental time off, as they usually do. Although there's always bad news released at the end of the year too, usually from government. It's a great time to release bad news around Christmas week or the week after if you are in public office. So Washington Policy Center never sleeps. So our blog will continue to cover the latest with all our center directors. Leave any closing remarks today before we?
Yes, I mean, one more thing. This idea that this institution of public education is just overwhelming and can't be reformed and changed lacks support. If you just look at the history of public education in Washington State, I was just looking at the numbers today. Okay, so our country was started in 1776. Remember that. We did not have a public system of schools available to every child until 120 years after that, in the late 1800s. Horace Mann in the 1830s started pushing this idea of these Prussian, model of schools, of standardized, one size fits all, creating factory workers for the new industrialized nations rising out of Germany, right? That was the model that we based our government schools on. It wasn't until the end of the 1800s that every public school student every child in the country was actually able to access public, this government school system. But that was only for grades 1st through 8th grade. So and then it wasn't until the early 1900s that we even had high schools generally available. So if you look over the course of time, we haven't had this system of public education for very long at all. So that should encourage all reformers, because if you look further back, way back, parents have always been at the forefront of demanding and getting options and learning for children, and that's what we should return to. So that it is not such a impossible thing to do. Not when you plant the seed that parents should have control over the education funding, because that's impossible to object to.
That's one of the things that's always bothered me about healthcare reform too, is it's true that things haven't always been one way, but after a while, people forget the way it used to be, or they never had the experience with how things used to be. So, as we, right now we, look at, I think it was the 1970s, who had a lot more direct pay, 60s, 70s, direct pay of basic services, and the more third-party payer systems took over that, the less of any connection there was between pay, and now we've got a big mess. Now, I don't know about you, but I've looked for a primary care provider recently, and it used to be you could make an appointment for the primary care provider, and you'd see somebody within a couple of weeks tops, and now you're talking 3, 4, 5 months, and that's the new normal, and a predicted new normal. And I worry that people get used to that system, instead of thinking that, hey, things don't have to be the way they are, they can be better. We have a quick question that popped in for you, Liv, before we close out, and that's, hey, the average spending for students in Washington public schools is about $19,000. Why aren't we asking for $15,000 to follow the students? Why limit ourselves?
Well, I'm with you. I would give the whole amount to the families for sure. There's no good reason to not give the whole amount to the families to educate the children. But this is an argument that you're having with an institution that's trying to protect itself, and so phasing it in as an idea, starting at 12,000, 15,000, that would be great. And we could say, well, this is saving money for the public schools. You don't have to educate this child, and you're getting to retain a certain portion, and so therefore it's cheaper. So if money is their argument, then then school choice will save schools money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lee. Thank you for your time, and thanks for spending the time with us here today on Washington Policy on the Go. Appreciate it. For everybody out there, remember this whole episode will be on our YouTube channel, so you can share it with Liv and others, and you can check out Liv had a couple of debates recently as well on school choice issue.
Oh, yeah.
Those are also on YouTube, and you can share those with friends too. Yeah, and watch for our email about the 20th on for Washington Policy on the Go. It's Christmas week, so we'll see about what's going to happen on that. And of course, we'll be able to wish you Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and the rest. And then we've got the legislative session to deal with right away in January. So there's just no stopping here. So we'll continue to carry the latest on state policy on our blog at washingtonpolicy.org. Have a great day, everybody, and appreciate your time.
Thank you, everybody. Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.
Bye.